Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fit for Purpose podcast.
My name is Brandon. This is Jacob. We're your hosts. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about navigating through injury.
Yeah, we're talking about how to continue to make progress in the gym and prioritize your fitness, even when dealing with nagging injuries or even serious injuries.
So come check it out as we dive in.
This is your vehicle.
Yes.
This is the vehicle that you reside in.
Mm-hmm.
Why not invest, like you were saying, in some regular maintenance for this vehicle?
Even though that tissue may have some, warning signs going on of like, hey, let's chill out. You want to give it the space and the time to heal, but there's other things that we can put our emphasis on to keep moving forward.
Get a win and kind of move on, right?
Get that win. A little stuffy today.
Yeah, I was a little congested this morning.
I think it's like the weather when you get these like changes from whereas it was like really cold last week to like all of a sudden 80
It
degrees.
swung. Yeah, I played soccer last night late, and sometimes that does it.
Outdoor, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is indoor too.
Yeah.
But yeah, our game didn't start till like 9:15.
Is this like a rec, like a
No, dude,
men's
it's
rec
really
league thing?
serious. I'm professional.
No, dude,
I get paid to be there.
I'm trying to walk on to ASU.
I've got a contract.
Dude, you're like 30.
I'm walking on at MCC next week.
I came across a video, like a page of this kid who goes to like Appalachian State, and
Where's that?
In the Appalachians.
Okay. I don't know what that is either. I don't even know what that is.
I guess it's like the Carolinas or something.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, continue.
Anyways, but it was the kid's page was like, watch me, like basically, here's how I'm going to become a walk-on for the Appalachian State football team. And it was like him and his buddies, like 6 a.m. we got our lifting session, and they're doing it's like they're learning squats for the first time with the barbell. And then then I crush my meal, and they're like going to Chick-fil-A, and it was like the feeling of this is really serious, but also so unserious.
Were they intentionally being funny, or was it like
definitely not.
Really? It was like I'm David Goggins. I'm gonna walk on.
It was like follow my page as I walk on to Appalachian State football team.
What's that movie with Mark Wahlberg where he walks on for the Eagles?
Oh, Invincible.
It's like they just watched Invincible for the first time. They're like,
yes,
I'm changing my whole life.
They saw the scene where he's playing football in the parking lot. It's raining.
Yeah,
they are lit up by the car lights.
Yep.
And he takes the hit on the windshield.
Yep.
Yeah, I painted that picture for you.
Badass.
Dude, that's a great movie.
That is a good movie.
But they for sure watched that and tried to harness the energy.
Like, this is it. If I just commit everything, I can become.
It had a lot of followers too.
Really?
But I think they think it's more like a comedic.
Do you follow Strong by Science?
Mm-mm.
No? I
Good
guess
one?
tight. Yeah, he's like a 30-year-old dad, husband, basketball player. Yeah.
Yeah, because we talked about this with Jerem the other day. Yeah, he's like, I want to be a 30-year-old NBA player.
Yeah. He's pretty shredded and he's pretty athletic.
Yeah. I would definitely hate to face that guy in a pickup game.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to the NBA, but
no.
I mean, his content is really authentic and chill, and he has a lot of followers.
Yeah, you're invested in the storyline of that for sure.
And he has his online training program where he I think he literally just posts what he's doing, and people pay a subscription for it.
He's got good stuff though.
Yeah,
the way he is able to map out his speed and footwork drills and basketball drills, and then he goes into his power section and his strength-based movements, and it is all legit stuff.
No, he does a really good job. Yeah. And he does some really unique lower body athletic work that I like, that I just never incorporate.
I always steal that stuff. I feel like I follow a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, and I'll be like, oh, that's cool. I'm stealing that.
That's sick.
Yeah. It's pretty simple, but it's like a hip flexor extension movement where you're locking your feet in a dumbbell or something, butts on a bench and you're like doing like a big lie back, like rib cage is down so you're not flared, and you're like working on extending that hip flexor and then like crunching back in like a single leg drill. So you're kind of like in this position. You ever seen
You're
that
standing?
one? No, you're sitting. You start seated like on a bench.
Okay.
You lock one single foot under a dumbbell or something for an anchor.
A heavy dumbbell?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you pull the opposite leg like into the chest, and you work on like falling back and using those.
Oh, to
like,
control it.
To control it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
It's pretty nasty. I threw it in like a whole program with Gen Pop people, and
Oh, nice.
they were dying in the best way.
You know what? Movement, like my Gen Pop people like just absolutely despise is the Copenhagen plank.
Oh,
You ever do
tough.
those? Those are so nasty.
I mean, I'm not at the state yet to be able to fully do those. I'll do like a
You
modified.
can't do a Copenhagen plank?
Well, dude,
I'm just kidding.
I wish. Those are disgusting.
Yeah.
Like you hug that bench.
Yep.
I'm at the stage where like I'm kicking my bottom foot out and creating a little bit less resistance, but
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah.
Nice, dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I feel like adductors, for those listening, these big old muscles that kind of run alongside the thigh, they just get kind of neglected. Like you hit those muscles by proxy of like a squat, an RDL, but you're never like truly engaging.
Yeah, and we're often training them like, yeah, they assist with hip extensions. So like like squat, RDL, they are getting work, but we almost never give them the direct attention of actually adducting.
Yeah.
Versus just being assisters with extension.
Yeah.
And then we lose stability.
Yeah, it's funny because like in the certification I did, a lot of the regressions for like a push up, like a TRX pull, quite a bit of other things was taking like a yoga block and like smashing it between the knees with the intention of kicking the adductors on, because if you can get those stabilizers on and that deep core on, chances are you're going to be in a better posture for some of those movements.
Yeah.
So
absolutely,
kind of taking those concepts into.
Well, when you create that adduction action and you're squeezing that, like one of the auxiliary muscles that works in conjunction with that action is the pelvic floor.
Yeah.
So once you start creating that adductor squeeze and then turning on the pelvic floor, and the pelvic floor is actually on a reflexive loop with 3 other muscles in your deep core, your multifidus, which runs along your spine, and then your transverse abdominals as well, and then your diaphragm. So those 4 muscles, right? Your pelvic floor, multifidus up the spine, diaphragm coming down from the top, and then TVA, your transverse abdominals, coming in from the front. That's that cylinder sucking up and in, right? Which creates that stability. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they get neglected, and like you said, we lose stability, and then we get reliant on kind of turning the feet out and kind of settling into our hips and lower back. Yep. Right? We kind of seen that.
You see that in like I just did a whole program of sumo deadlifts. Yeah. And you see that instant like twist out of the feet. It's like, no, let's try to keep those toes straight on. That's the other thing is, if once you open up here, you're even losing like glute med and kind of shutting down some of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, if I'm trying to sumo deadlift as heavy as I can, I will turn
wide.
I'll go wide and I'll turn my toes out because I am way stronger with it. You can create kind of a different leverage. But yeah, when the adductors are weak, then our posture starts to kind of sag. Our hips start to kind of go forward, right? And our low back starts to arch more. We're kind of just like
which is
sitting on our skeleton.
I've been working with quite a bit of like not like directly postpartum, but women who have had kids.
Oh yeah, I mean any woman who's had kids.
My wife specifically, like I've been working with her to help some of that pelvic floor stuff because she'll do deadlifts, she'll do squats, and it's that immediate anterior pelvic tilt. So for those like watching, as soon as those hips shift here and you get that kind of what's called like lordosis or extension in that low spine, you're shutting down all of those like deep core muscles we're talking about.
Yep.
So I've been working with my wife specifically, and then a few of my clients on some of this stuff like adductor work and dead bugs where you're that rib cage down cue and getting those abs kicked on. Because that stuff gets so neglected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I mean, just as kind of a side note, posture in general, postural function like is so foundational for just being able to exist and move and function without pain over the course of your life. You know, I think it gets neglected, but also, you know, training itself, you can really go down a rabbit hole. And, you know, some days I feel like I could train for 2 hours and not do everything I wanted to do.
Sure.
To address all the little nooks and crannies and get, you know, like prepare myself in every way. Like I want to be strong and mobile and athletic, and I want my posture to be good. So, yeah, really you can dedicate hours a day to, you know, your physical well-being, but also, you know, a good coach can help you get the 90% of that in 3 to 5 hours a week. So, yeah,
taking like the nuggets that truly matter and sprinkling them in throughout your week.
Yeah, and finding ways to sprinkle in some like adductor and pelvic floor work to the workout that you're already doing.
Yeah.
Or even just being more intentional with how you're doing a movement to facilitate those things instead of like having to create a whole another program around them.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, that's where, and we're going to get into it quite a bit here. Your prep work can be a lot of that stuff too.
Yep.
Like for me, as I've battled different injuries and things like that, where my body has unique needs, I've learned to just say, okay, like in my movement prep, here's the things I'm going to incorporate. If that's, you know, some banded glute walks and some couch stretch, getting my hip like stretched out and opened up, but just using that, you know, 10, 15 minute window at the start of my workout to like do what I need to do to spend intentional time thinking about those things. And then, when you hit your program, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to hit this by proxy by doing my deadlifts and my squats and my press and you name it. But
I've found that, you know, like we've talked about, the meat and potatoes of any program is that push, pull, hinge, squat, carry, right? So, you know, no matter who I'm training, we're going to be incorporating some variation of all those patterns.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can regress a push pattern from, you know, like a bottoms up kettlebell upside down to where you're having to like stabilize it and you're standing. So it's, you know, really neurologically demanding. You can, you know, regress that all the way to like a simple sliding your hand up the wall as a press. But, you know, all of my clients are going to do some sort of push, pull, hinge, squat, carry.
Yep.
But where the session and the intention really changes is that first 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
With like, okay, what do we need to address specifically for you to actually be able to be ready to handle what we're going to do for the session? You know, how do we need to prepare so that you can be ready for that push, pull, hinge, squat, carry?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I get, you know, there's a lot more variance from client to client. And, you know, that's where it can be beneficial for you as a person. If you're in the gym or you're looking to improve your fitness, of just like the program itself is going to be really important that you're hitting all the major patterns, but you can really make a lot of progress with how you feel and how you move by getting some sort of specific assessment and prescription from, you know, someone who is trained to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is kind of a great segue because today we are talking about pain and training through pain and injuries. And one of the concepts we'll dig into is the idea of, well, before we get kind of too far into that, like when we experience pain, sometimes the terms that are used for these injuries are like overuse injuries. And so one of the concepts we were going to discuss is like the idea of it's not overuse, it's like underprepared.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit. We're kind of already in that realm.
Yes.
But for you, like that term underprepared, what does that mean to you?
So, I mean, first of all, I love the idea of just reframing it, right? So reframing it in your mind literally changes the problem, which is really cool. We have that kind of ability to take whatever obstacle or problem we're facing, and if we can reframe it, we can look at it from a completely different angle and then choose how we respond to it.
Yeah.
Right. So overuse injury, that implies just that, okay, it's overused. So now I need to stop doing stuff.
Yeah.
I need to chill, which, rest is good. But if we look at it from the perspective of it being an underprepared injury, that means we have some work to do in order to prepare our bodies or prepare that specific area of the body to be able to handle, whatever it is we throw at it.
Yeah.
So, with this kind of injury, an underprepared injury, it's basically just the idea that your body, the tissues in your body, can handle a certain amount of load, right? And the equation for an injury is if a force or a load goes into the tissue that is greater than that tissue can handle, there's going to be an injury, right? And that can happen in an instant, right? Like an instantaneous acute load that is too much for the tissue to handle. And, we get some sort of tearing or, or probably not you could break a bone. Obviously that'd be
insane.
You hit the ground hard and you break your leg. That's what happened. The too much force went through the bone. But, with gym injuries, it's almost always like some sort of soft tissue thing, right?
Yep.
Or across time, the load going into that tissue was more than the tissue could handle or more than the tissue could recover from, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the idea of like overuse comes from. But again, if we prepare and we make something stronger and more resilient, then we're going to be more prepared to handle whatever it is that we're doing. So, yeah, that's the idea of underprepared versus overuse. So we want to prepare that tissue now to handle more.
Yeah. And I like the concept too of it's not avoidance, even though that tissue may have some, warning signs going on of like, hey, let's chill out. You want to give it the space and the time to heal, but there's other things that we can put our emphasis on to keep moving forward. I think anytime we face injury, there's kind of a few different ways we can like navigate it. I think the first person where you get some of these overuse injuries is, you slap that tape on the check engine light as your body's giving you those signals and you're like, it's no big deal. Let me just keep pushing through. And eventually it gets to the point where it's maybe too far gone. But then there's that other like viewpoint of saying, hey, this is talking to me. Let me address it. And now what are some things I can fill my tool belt with to create preparedness with it specifically and not let it totally like throw me off track if I want to stay accountable to my goals and keep my body moving and all these habits that I prioritize and et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your body's always talking to you, right? So yeah, if you ignore it long enough, it's going to get to the point where you probably do need to step back and take time off.
Yep.
But if you're having a nagging injury or some sort of pain, and it's still pretty early on, or it's not, too intense yet, then that's definitely something that you can work with and work through, if you're just intelligent about how you do it.
Yeah.
Right. Movement and blood flow are fantastic for healing.
Absolutely.
So doing nothing isn't necessarily the answer unless you have a really serious acute injury that you need to let heal for a little bit.
Yeah.
But even then, like we're like surgery, like when you have like an ACL surgery or something nowadays, they put you in like a continuous movement brace so that joint never stops moving. So
and like joint replacement kind of stuff. Like, dude, you're up and walking right away or whatever it may be.
So we've started to discover more and more that movement and blood flow are super important for healing versus just resting and doing nothing.
Yes.
So that's the other angle to look at it from is like, okay, this hurts. Okay, how can I work with this body part or with this movement at a level that is pain-free, right? And that's this. I really like. Multiple people have kind of popularized this idea or this kind of strategy to training or preparing the body for training in sports. But Ben Patrick, Knees Over Toes guy, a lot of what his philosophy is based around is pain-free ability is what he calls it specifically. But, just because your knees hurt doesn't mean that you can't go knees over toes, or
Sure.
you can't train your lower body. Like that's his whole thing. He had really jacked up knees and had, all sorts of injuries, surgery on one, no surgery on the other. And he found a way to progress himself to where he's at now. And if you guys don't know, he's a basketball player, and he's got like a 40-inch vertical, and he's popular on Instagram for doing some crazy stuff. But he's also like a very intelligent coach, and he walks the walk. But he is someone I look to in this space of like overuse or underprepared, because his whole strategy, his whole training ethos is around preparing tissue to handle load. And you start with whatever you can do without pain, and you work from there, and you slowly build up over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. And that's just it. There's always like a starting point that's right sized for you, and figuring out a way that you can navigate over time, progressing into, it's not like, if I have a meniscus tear, it doesn't mean that I'm going to ask you to, go into like an ass to grass lunge and drive that knee over the toe, because chances are could make matters worse.
Something's going to give.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about going back to the word overuse. Like you think about like an engine that doesn't have all the pieces kind of in the right order. If I'm doing a squat as an example, and maybe I have just this little ailment where my body has found this path of least resistance, and over time I do this thing that's maybe not, perfectly balanced and aligned, that little kink or, in the armor eventually is going to, like you said, it's going to take the brunt of all that force. And that's where you start getting that paring down. So it's a matter of, okay, what can I do to kind of bring everything back in line, even if it's a matter of backing off load, backing off reps, even backing off sets. Maybe it's, let's take the squat, for example. Maybe you're changing that depth and you're sitting to a box to where you're getting to that more comfortable position. Like you're explaining, like doing what you have the capacity to do pain-free, so that over time, as you make that effort to focus on this specific thing and be intentional, then you'll be able to kind of move back forward. So it's almost like 2 steps back to take that step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point there of like, you were talking about the squat specifically, and, you were saying if something's out of alignment, let's say your left knee is just caving in every time you squat, over time that might cause a little bit of a quote unquote overuse injury, right? With one part of your knee, because it's not aligned as you're doing the squat.
Yep.
So one approach, like we were just talking about, would be, okay, how do you bulletproof your knee so that even if you do fall out of alignment, it's not going to be an issue? And then the other approach is, how do we make your squat perfect, or how do we improve the pattern so that the knee is always in alignment and you're not going to get that overuse injury? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there's both perspectives here, and there's both ways to look at the problem. But I think for me, it's always, why not utilize both?
Absolutely.
Right? Why not utilize both?
Yeah, because like one's still like in our profession, as we're training clients, like my goal of a client coming in is like, I want to give them a win. Even if they're injured, I'm going to give them a win for the day. So if in order to give them the win and make them feel like they got a quality workout, it was, hey, we're goblet squatting with a dumbbell to a 20-inch box today, but they were still able to do that thing. And then in our movement prep or at the end of the session, we can focus on, okay, now we're going to do this like dynamic tissue work and spend 10 minutes doing that. By doing both things, I'm the same way. Like by doing both things, you're going to progress further versus like every session just being this drag of a PT session, and you're just like, oh, I'm just rehabbing. Here I am. What a mind F too. Like you're just going to lose. You're going to lose passion for what you're doing. Yeah. Because you feel like you're just kind of stalled out.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, if you're someone right now who's dealing with some sort of nagging injury or like soft tissue pain that is not going away, and it's, maybe it's getting worse, but it's not so serious that you think that you need surgery, or that you have like something that's not going to heal on its own, then what I would do is start by easing off the volume a little bit, right? So doing a little bit less volume, meaning, volume is the weight that you're doing times the amount of reps that you're doing times the amount of sets that you're doing. So if you do like one less set or drop the weight a little bit, whatever it is that you can get through some movements without pain, and then slowly start working back up.
Yeah.
You might even want to take something, take what's called the deload week, where you just do, for all of your workouts, you do about 50% effort for everything, and just letting the body kind of recover overall. Because if you're training consistently and you're training hard, week after week after week, you start to accumulate fatigue over time.
Yes.
Right? So, just having a week where you pull back a little bit, that might be enough to be like, wow, I feel like a completely different person.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll get that way. I'll get like 12 weeks, 16 weeks, like deep into a program or training and be like, wow, like
my body hurts.
I don't feel like I'm getting stronger and everything feels heavy. Like, what's going on? I must not be training hard enough. And I'm like, oh wait, I could take like 3-4 days off and I feel
like $1 million.
Yeah, I feel so much better. I feel stronger. My joints feel better. So it might be that simple. But again, pulling back, finding what your pain-free level is as far as volume and as far as the range of motion with the exercise.
Yeah.
And then progressing from there.
For sure.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like square one.
Yeah. And then, you're kind of like it's going to take a little bit of time, because it really is this feedback loop of listening to how your body responds to what you're feeding it. So if it is like, I take that little bit of time off, or I regress what I'm doing and try to keep doing a little bit, but maybe it stops talking to you. Awesome. That means you've kind of like solved that missing puzzle piece. And now you have, again, everything is about adding that next tool to the tool belt. If it continues to talk to you, then you can talk about, okay, what are my next steps? And like, I always encourage like people, if it's something functionally related, if it's a movement mechanic issue, if it's a soft tissue issue, like, please, for the love of God, if you're listening to this, like, find someone who's educated in the space of like physical movement mechanics first, because especially in today's like day and age of like the medical field, like the last thing you want when you're in pain is to get stuck in that loop of the doctor's visit and the imaging and the insurance and the follow-up visit and okay, let's establish next steps, especially if it's something that like, man, if you just got assessed by your PT and or your trainer and you got 3 correctives that you could have been working with for 2 months and it could potentially be better. That's a tough cycle to get stuck in. So that's always like that next step, man. If you can't solve it on your own by, like you said, regressing some of that load, what can you do to seek knowledge and education? And then from there, it's kind of like, okay, then what's next?
Yeah.
But
and I'm all for getting people around you that are helping you. Like I go see a medical massage therapist once a month, sometimes twice a month. And she knows kind of like what's going on with me. We've had long conversations. I see her, consistently. So she knows what things kind of tend to bother me. Yeah. And she helps me with those things. She reminds me different correctives to do. And it's like, she gives me perspective, and she also helps keep me healthy. Yeah. Right. And then I also have like, kind of a holistic focused chiropractor that I go to like once a month. She helps keep me dialed in, reminds me like, oh, this is what I'm seeing with your pelvis. This is what I'm seeing with your shoulder. Like, maybe consider this. So I'm all for outsourcing and figuring out, how to get people around you that are going to help keep you healthy. Yeah.
It's merely making you better at what you do and allowing you to continue having success with what you do. Cause it's just like, I keep using analogies here. Your car needs regular maintenance. Yeah. You can't survive off of one oil change for 15,000 miles. Like, I wish you could.
Can.
Yeah. Well, you buy a Tesla.
not for very long, but
yeah. Like, eventually, again, it's going to have that feedback loop. It's going to start talking. There's going to be issues. So yeah, it's just that it's regular maintenance, and it's education, because the more educated you get on your circumstance, like the better prepared you're going to become. And the longer you're going to be able to be consistent with your training, your exercise, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And even if you're not a fitness person or a personal trainer, even if you just like to go to the gym a couple times a week or 3 times a week, you kind of stay on top of your physical fitness. If you're an accountant, or you work a desk job, or you're like a full-time mom, whatever that is, your body, this is your vehicle.
Yes.
This is the vehicle that you reside in, that that you're walking about and navigating this reality with for, however long you're alive. Like, why not invest, like you were saying, in some regular maintenance for this vehicle?
Yeah, because all those things like play a role into how you're feeling. Like if you're sitting at a desk all day long, that's going to have a response. If you're, driving long distances for hours and hours at a time, that's going to have a response. If you're on your feet all day long, like you are blue collar work, some labor job, like, and you're taking that wear and tear, there's a response. So like, just because you're not someone who maybe is die hard in the gym 5 days a week, has this like elaborate training program, like there are still things that you have to check in with and care for, like you said, one body. So
absolutely maintain it. And if you're, any investment that you put into your health and your body is going to pay back dividends in how you show up for your family, how you show up in your relationships, how you show up in your job.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's going to influence how you feel, and how you feel has so much influence over how you perform and how you show up. Yeah. Right. So, we're kind of getting off track. We're talking about injury, but it's the same idea as even if you're a person who doesn't work out and you're in pain, right? So say you haven't been working out, you don't have a regular gym routine, you're not seeing a trainer, but you have a knee pain, or you have a back pain, or you have a shoulder pain, or you have a neck pain. Fitness or working out or hiring a personal trainer, like that might be like the first kind of string to pull on. Okay, like how am I going to get out of pain? And then you start pulling on that string of like, okay, I need to do a little bit more exercise. I need to walk. I need to stretch this way. I need to, I need to do X, Y, and Z to help maintain my body. So that could be the message that your body's giving you, that like, hey, I need some attention. Yeah. Right. And that might be the first kind of stair step to taking better care of your body, focusing on your health, maybe getting into the gym a couple times a week.
Yeah. And be proactive in that. So it's not a lot of times I think we become numb to our body's cueing. And it's really easy to ignore it till it's gotten to this point where it's like, oh shit. So, encouragement to pay attention to those cues, listen to those cues, and kind of face it head on if you can, for what it's worth. But you said something earlier about like, I think something that gets overlooked until you are in pain is how much your mental state is affected by how you feel. Because I mean, speaking from personal experience, like when you don't feel well, like something's hurting, your mind can make it a much larger thing than it actually is. And it's really hard to get out of that cycle or that loop. And so, having a plan of action to help you get relief from that can even free up how you're feeling. Cause you were mentioning like your mental state gets affected, then it affects your relationships, then it affects your conversations, and it absolutely does. If that's, even for me this past week, like that was the only thing on my mind was like something's wrong with my specific injury. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, okay, here we go. Like, every conversation with my wife is, well, I think maybe I need to talk to my doctor. Maybe, and you get to that, like that high stress state.
Yeah. It's consuming.
Dude, I straight up, like I had, and we can kind of dive into it a little bit, but I had like an ortho visit this past week, and they take your like blood pressure at the start of the visit. And like, I was anticipating, seeing him, and my blood pressure was like skyrocketed. So like, just think like
you're all stressed out.
Yeah. Living in that state of stress because of how you're feeling. And then the thoughts you're having around that pain and, what's going to come of it as a worst case scenario, like that in itself takes a huge toll on you.
And then, we as humans, we're very adaptable, right? So that can become your normal. Yeah. Like there's people that walk around in like level 6, level 7 back pain every day. Yep. And that's just their life. Yeah. You start to internalize that and it becomes your normal, but you don't realize like how you're always on edge and stressed out and your blood pressure's high and you don't feel good. Like that stuff starts to kind of float under the radar.
Absolutely.
And it takes a huge toll on your health. So I love that you brought that up. Like just what it really comes down to is paying attention and then actually engaging with the problem.
Yeah.
Right. You said something earlier about slapping the tape over the check engine light, like just ignoring it. And, we do that with so many different things in our lives. But when it comes to, our physical bodies, like I was saying, the investment there is so important because it's the only body you have.
Yeah.
And just paying attention to what's happening in your body, what you're feeling, even emotions, right? Like what's coming up, paying attention to that. And then number 2 is actually engaging with it. It's like, okay, my shoulder hurts. What am I going to do about it? Right? And then things start to open up as you actually start to engage with the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was saying, it could be that you reach out to a personal trainer or a physical therapist, and that becomes like a path that you're moving down where you're starting to be more curious about your own body and take better care of yourself.
Yeah, I would hit too, like as a trainer, I don't have this like lofty experience. I don't have a massive list of certifications of all this knowledge I've taken in, but I've used my experiences and my injuries and the time I've spent with people more educated than me who are a part of my care plan to like learn from those people. Like I know a lot of what I know and what I'm able to give to my clients to serve them because of my own experience. Like I've been able to utilize that to become more educated and then take some of these corrective exercises, take some of these like, oh, you have like pinching in your hip with this specific thing. Like, hey, let's try this. Oh yeah, that feels better. But that's only because of what I've personally been through. And now I'm able to like take that and give it to other people.
Yep.
So
yeah, exactly, dude. From pain to purpose.
Pain to perp. Dude, do we change the name? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so we talked about, kind of training with injury, kind of through injury, how to go from, being in pain to scaling back and then progressing forward. And that has to do with, these kind of like we were talking about under-prepared injuries or these overuse injuries, these soft tissue kind of smaller nagging injuries.
Yeah.
I think the whole other side of injury and training with injury or around injury is when you have something really serious going on.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have a broken bone, you have a torn ligament, you've just had a surgery. How do we approach recovering from that, but then also training around it so that we're not fully detraining our bodies?
Yeah.
Right? If we have, your experience was a hip injury, but I know you continued to train your upper body, your conditioning in some ways. So yeah, I think we should dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted the prison bod. That's all it was.
That's right, baby.
Big up top, as Kevin Hart says. You ever seen that stand up?
Yeah.
He's like,
up top.
up top, down low, whatever he says. No, yeah, man. It's again, kind of the biggest thing is seeking the right help and having the appropriate timeline for what that's going to look like. And then, yeah, finding ways to just continue to do what you can. I'm like constantly preaching, if it's on my social or whatever, it's like the idea of doing what's within your control. So if it's something where it is, a more serious issue and maybe you can't do these handful of movements, it's like, okay, great. Well, I still have this arsenal of things that I can do, and I'm going to maintain that as best as I could possibly can. So I'm not just fully giving up and falling off track. So, yeah, for me, that timeline was much longer than expected. But it taught me a lot about like having mental endurance and continuing to find ways to navigate movement over everything. So, yeah. And then I think having like an appropriate timeline of what your recovery should look like, trusting professionals in that process. Like I'm learning that like right now, not trying to push too fast. That's just in my nature. It's like, I feel a little bit better and I'm starting to push a little load and it's like, I'm back, let's go.
Yeah.
So like kind of pumping the brakes to really grasp like, hey, this is going to take some time. Like you may get back to where you were, but it's going to look like a little bit different journey to get there. Give us a
little insight into your injury. So you're coming off of an injury.
Yep.
You had a surgery not too long ago. So kind of give us a little bit of background with that, because if you're you're referencing your journey here, but like tell us what's going on.
I'm kind of like beating around the bush. So I had a hip scope procedure, which that specifically is you have this little ring of cartilage that lives around the head of your like femur bone. So that's sitting up in your hip. You've got this ring of cartilage that just reduces friction of the joint. That specifically tore. And then I had this little like weird bony fragment that's like sitting out that was kind of causing rubbing over time.
Doesn't sound good.
It's not something that you could necessarily avoid. And it's kind of like what we're talking about, that overuse created wear and tear to where it became a bigger issue. So for me, I had a hip scope procedure, which is a pretty intense surgery. Like, think it gets minimized, but it's legit. So the timeline for me was like 6 to 9 months of getting back on my feet and 6 months is like best case scenario to be like back physically doing stuff. That doesn't mean you're going to be 100%.
Yeah. Back to squatting 350.
And really, truly, I mean, something that severe, if it's a shoulder tear, a hip, whatever, I mean, you could experience symptoms for up to a year. Like, so
yep.
Yeah, so for me, it was the first half of the year was really just trying to do what I could leading up to that surgery. The second half of the year for me, this past 6 months, was rehabbing from that injury. So, first 6 weeks was crutches, no walking. Then it's like, how can you start to introduce movements that the hip is responsible for? And then how can you progress that over time with a little bit more load, a little bit more range of motion, a little bit more, if it's like different factors. So we've talked about like speed, intensity, weight, etc. So following this like nice steady plan of kind of getting back to where you were.
So, and you didn't stop training.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Not. So you have a hip surgery.
I literally took like 2 weeks off of exercise.
Yeah.
And that was the 2 weeks right after I had surgery.
Yeah.
But then it was like trying to get back in the gym, and I at least could do upper body.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing upper body.
So I was like crutching around my garage with a crutch here, a dumbbell here, and just trying to like pull stuff into place. And
Yes. Yeah, but it's like staying fit.
Yeah.
Right. Is going to be so much more. The recovery process for your hip is going to be a lot smoother, and your body's going to be in a healthier state, so that your hip is going to recover more quickly.
Yes.
If you're staying fit, you're staying healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
Blood flow movement is blood flow movement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's going to have like benefit as a whole to your entire ecosystem of your body.
Yep.
Versus, just because I couldn't do squats for a season, doesn't mean like I'm going to be totally thrown off track.
Yeah. 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 You can still PR your bench press.
Frick yeah, dude.
Let's go. That's all that really matters.
Without any leg drive.
Yeah, who cares about squatting, dude?
Yeah, exactly.
We just want to bench.
Yeah, I don't look at anybody's legs on Instagram, dude. Just bros and they're just kidding.
Yeah, but so, step one with recovering from something serious like that is find what you can do.
Yes.
Don't let that There's a Russ line that I really like. I don't know if you like the rapper Russ or the artist.
I haven't.
You don't know the music artist Russ?
No.
Really? Oh. He's a singer, songwriter, rapper, but he has a line that I really like. He says, trying times doesn't mean it's time to stop trying.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it's like, I just love that. It hits.
Yeah.
Right? Because, when you get into trying times, but that doesn't mean like, oh, this is where I stop. It's just like,
definitely not.
This is the obstacle. How do I engage with it? And how do I move forward? How can I at least be, still doing what I can, right? Controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
So step one, you have a torn labrum in your hip. You got to get surgery. You're not going to be back to 100% for who knows, 6 to 12 months. Don't sulk, right? Figure out what you can do and keep going.
Yeah.
So that's step one is like how you're framing
I have every
that.
excuse to stop. Like my entire profession is based on me being able to do physical activity. Like that, even just the mental toil that had for me a couple months leading up to even having surgery of what will my business look like? Like I had to put my business in some ways on autopilot and retain the people that I had and trust that like I've given them enough knowledge to succeed with me just like verbally cueing, because like again, my whole life was based on my ability to move. So I had every excuse to be like, this is it. I'm going to sulk, I'm going to pout, you know what I mean? But
I quit.
Yeah, but you're not going to just like stop.
Exactly. Yeah. So having that perspective from the jump is really important.
Yeah.
And then from there, what are some of the more practical, applicable things? I know especially early on, you were getting help from a physical therapist, which is huge,
Yep.
right? Because they're trained in taking you from 0 to 1,
Yeah.
right? So, what are some of the things that you did with your physical therapist? What are some of the things that you did on your own? Maybe not specific drills necessarily, but, kind of overarching themes like how do you get from 0 to 1? Say 10 is where you were before you get injured, right? Or where you want to be. But right after injury, after surgery, something like that, you're at a 0. How do you get from nothing back to just like on track, that next step?
For me personally, I was lucky to have a doctor who really outlined the plan of like, I got this sheet that I was sent home with like, week 1 to 2, this is what we're going to focus on. Week 2 to 4, this is what we're focusing on. And then having my physical therapist be that liaison between me and my doctor to say, okay, like this is what, when he says this specifically from weeks 1 to 2, this is what that looks like. Here's a handful of things I want you to do. And then it's me as the patient being diligent about, okay, if I'm being asked to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be consistent about it. I'm going to do them each and every day. And then when it's ready to move to that next stage, I want to be ready to receive that next group of things.
Yep.
So you're constantly kind of elevating yourself to that next thing. And then even for me, like, I have a relationship with my physical therapist. Like we're great friends, and he would assume like because of what I do for a profession, like he doesn't really have to give me, if I say hip extension, hey, just do like some hip extension stuff. Like that's for us trainers, we're like, okay, we get that. But
yeah.
I told him, I was like, dude, like I want you to explain this to me like I'm 5. Like I don't know this.
Yeah.
And that was super helpful for me to like him to have the freedom to say, okay, well then here's exactly what this looks like. Here's 5 movements that I want you to do and focus on. And then once you finish that, here's how you're going to move them to the next stage. So it was very strategic and like, but it still took, I think what we're trying to get at is it still took the diligency to accept that this is what we're doing right here and right now, and be diligent about doing it over and over and over. Yep.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is like, number 1, take responsibility.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to take responsibility for your own recovery.
Yep.
Right. Someone can give you the perfect training program, but if you don't do it, if you don't execute it to the best of your ability, then it's not going to get you anywhere.
Yep.
Right. That's number 1. And then number 2, what I'm hearing is find a therapist, physical therapist, whatever it is, that is not phoning it in. Someone that's paying attention, someone that's passionate about what they do, and someone you get along with. And if you are at a PT place where you feel like you're not getting attention, or the program is really basic, or they're not helping you, or you feel like you're just kind of like a number, go find somewhere else, because that also exists out there too.
Yeah, I had an experience with a client, or not a client, but an individual like reached out to me. They were post-op ACL tear, and they were going to a PT and just stagnant. Like they were frustrated because they like were only so far, I think 9 weeks out at the time. And they were like, I'm only here. Like I haven't even done this yet. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like I feel like you should be a little bit further along. Like not really knowing the full situation, but I was like, hey, you always can go seek a second opinion. Like you're not stuck to where you're at. And and they went and did that. And sure enough, they were like, oh man, thanks for like telling me that. Cause now I'm like in a way better place.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, just like anything out there, like there are good practitioners and there are bad practitioners. So yeah, take responsibility for your own journey. And part of that is like finding the right help.
Yeah.
Like don't settle for someone who's not doing a good job or not giving you the attention or, the specificity that you need for your rehab. Yeah. So I think that, those are probably the 2 big keys, right? From going from 0 to 1.
Yep.
Okay, now you just had a little bit of a setback, right? You were just kind of talking about that because you were pushing a little bit hard, but getting from one.
That's because I try to keep up with you. This guy.
Yeah, most people can. But yeah, you want to go from, okay, now I'm back on my feet a little bit. I can do some movements. I can train this area of my body. But how do you go from 1 back to 10 intelligently?
Yeah, being honest with your timeline is kind of the best way I would say that. So not being too quick to jump to that 10, really doing it with a slow, true progression. And really, I mean, we've talked about this kind of whole almost hour of like listening to your body's cueing. Because if you do something that's maybe a little bit much, know that you got to back that shit off to have the right dosing of stuff. With soft tissue specifically, like we kind of touched on it, but like my specific injury, like there's very little like blood flow to that area.
Yeah, tendon or ligament or joint, right?
So when you talk about like lack of blood flow, it means it's going to take that much longer to heal. And so if it's not at a place where it's ready to handle that load and you're pushing too much, like your boy did, you can set yourself back, truly.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is you can get into like some tendonitis and tendinopathy type issues where if that muscle has been deregulated for some time and not active, and then you say, okay, well now I'm going to go and push it, it's going to respond by saying like, oh crap,
it's underprepared,
right? Exactly. So like for me, that's what kind of happened to me over these past couple weeks is I had underprepared tissue, and I was feeling really good. It was awesome. Like I definitely followed this progression where I was getting stronger, moving well, and then it kind of was like, all right, here we go. And it was just that little bit of hiccup, which it's normal. It happens. Your mind will certainly play tricks on you with it. But the thing I was like reminded from my physical therapist with this specific situation is with certain, if it's surgeries and bigger injuries, you're changing the anatomy of your body. And it's really easy to go back to maybe how you used to do things when you got away with it, with how your body was structured before. Like for me, like they shaved off bone, they changed soft tissue, they drilled into my muscles. So there's going to be different biofeedback there. And so to try and do things like I used to do it, it's a whole different ballgame. So it's almost like we've talked about taking those steps back and assessing, okay, like what are correct movement patterns? How do I get in a better position so that I don't end up in a poor situation? Of trying to like fall back on like what I used to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're being asked to grow and become more aware and do things differently. Right. Because you got injured in the first place for a reason, unless it was some freak accident. Right. And I think, we've talked about different variables that you can kind of play with when it comes to your training. Especially when you're coming out of an injury and you're dealing with underprepared tissues because you had a surgery and that labrum is still repairing, it's still getting back to 100%, so it's going to be a little underprepared, right? It can't handle the same amount of load and force that it used to be able to handle before it was injured, right? So a lot of people, when they're looking at progress in the gym and they're trying to quote unquote move forward or get better or hit that next win in the gym, the first thing that we always tend to look at is what weight is on the bar, right? So it's okay. Well, I did 100 pounds last week, so like I need to do 110 this week and 120 the next week, and we're just looking to progress in that linear fashion by going heavier and heavier. And progressive overload is a really important concept of progressively putting more load on the tissue over time to get it to respond. But that load doesn't always have to come from necessarily more weight. It could come from a greater range of motion. It could come from a slower repetition. It could come from more repetitions or more sets of repetitions at the same weight, right? So there's plenty of different variables that we can play with when we're looking to create progress, to do something better than we have done it before. That doesn't have to necessarily mean putting a more aggressive load directly into the tissue itself.
Yeah.
Right.
That's spot on. And like incorporating, like I would say start with like a smaller amount of movements and add more movements is even another way you could progress that. Cause, like variety. In my case, like I'll go, you know, let's say I do 4 movements and then the next day, like something's talking to me. It's the less movements I have, the more I'm going to be aware of like, okay, that one and that one are what caused that response versus like if I do 10 different things and then I don't feel good the next day, I don't know where to begin with like what to pull out. So
yeah, absolutely. It's easier to kind of dial in like what's causing the issue.
Totally.
Right. Especially early on. It's like, okay, you don't need to do 6, 7 different movements. Pick 2, you know, and see how that feels. And then when you want to progress, you can add a third movement with a couple sets. Right. So then you're adding load, you're adding volume to the amount of work that you're doing, but you're not necessarily having to add more and more weight for one specific movement.
Yeah, it's like having the freedom to like adjust it. Like I think even for me, like I get so stuck to the script of like, okay, it's not a good workout unless I did like 3 sets progressing weight with that specific movement and then moved on to the next thing. But giving yourself the freedom to be like, hey, this can look different. Maybe it's, like you said, it's 2 sets of this thing and then I do this 1 stabilizer movement and that's all I'm doing for the day. And then I want to assess how I feel. And be okay with like, you don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to break down the muscle. You don't have to feel super sore. The win is like, are you continuing to progress forward? Not are you continuing to derail yourself because you're trying to look for that good workout or whatever.
Yeah. Quote unquote good workout. Yeah. Like, it was only a good workout if I'm absolutely wrecked the next day. It's like, well, especially if you're training with an injury or trying to bounce back from an injury, like that's not the path to be taking. You want to train to a level where you feel like you want to train the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that goes for anybody. Like
true.
That's like the first thing I tell like a new client when they show up for a very first session is like, hey, today we're going to take it pretty chill. I just want to see how you move. And the goal is not that you're super sore. Like I want you to come back tomorrow. Like, I selfishly hope you pay me again. No, but it's like
that's what it's really about.
Yeah. It's like the win is like you come back. Yeah. Like you want to, like you said, I want to enjoy this workout and feel like I can come back and do it again.
Yes. Yeah. Get a win and kind of move on. Right.
Get that win.
Yeah. And that's huge. It's like, you don't, like we were just talking about, you don't need to crush yourself. You don't need to be adding weight every single workout. It's find whatever little win that you can accomplish with that workout. Something that is just as a hint of progress, of moving in the right direction. And don't fool yourself, right? Don't give yourself an easy out to where you don't have to work hard in the gym. Yeah. But if you can do your squat to a deeper range of motion, or you can do it with better control and better intention, or you could do a couple extra reps on that last set, any of those variables is a win and a sign of progress. Yeah. Just because you didn't add 20 pounds to the bar doesn't mean that you're not moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. It can't be this like comparison game too. That's the other thing I would squash instantly, especially with more significant injuries, is like, don't play the comparison game with what like so-and-so is able to do. Like we're going to step into the gym. You're writing up a squat workout. Chances are I'm going to be over here with the 30-pound dumbbell. You're going to be like slapping some weight on the bar. Like that's just our realities. And I'm not going to like try and feel bad about the fact that I can't keep up with you like that. Well, damn it. I'm just kidding. And then the other thing is, so it's you versus you, but it's not you versus what you used to do. It's you versus now and your present. And then that's the comparison game you can play is, okay, last week I was here. Okay, 2 months ago I was here. Okay, 3 months ago I was here. So that you're constantly comparing yourself against your present self, not, a year ago I was squatting 300 pounds for reps, of course. But like today, no. And I'm not going to like sit here and beat myself up for like, man, how like I wish I was there. It's like, no, like 3 weeks ago, I couldn't do that. And I'm pretty stoked for like how far I've come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's that reframing and just keeping your mind in check and keeping that healthy perspective, because part of injuries, a huge part of injuries is that mental game.
Yes.
It's like, it's so easy to get down. I mean, at least for me, when I'm dealing with an injury, it's very easy for me to get down on myself and like feel discouraged and feel defeated and feel like I'm never going to get to where I want to be. But that is not a healthy, or not only is it not healthy, not only does it not feel good, but it's actually not the most effective way to approach the situation.
Yeah.
So if you can reframe it and change that perspective, like you're gonna feel better about the situation, and you're gonna actually control what you can, and you're gonna make more of the situation by just reframing it in your mind.
Yeah. Dude, love
cool,
it.
man. Anything else? What do you think?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I
Sweet.
hope this stuff is helpful and encouraging and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just, I know, hopefully if you're listening to this podcast, you're at least getting in the gym and, being intentional and taking care of yourself to some degree, even if it's just a little bit more than you were last week, like just, finding little ways to continue to take care of yourself and invest in yourself. But if you are someone who's been moving down that path and trying to get in better shape and trying to eat healthier and just, trying to, like we said, invest in this body, in this vehicle, and you run into a hiccup, you run into an injury, you run into some sort of speed bump, just know that working through that, figuring out what the issue is and how to engage with that and how to move forward past it, like that is the path forward. Yeah. It's not something that's there to stop you in this.
This is part of the big picture process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to stop you unless you let it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Signing out.
Peace.